Today, I'm going to show you my exact process and how I paint this landscape scene. First, we are going to lay in the lightest values of the scene, the parts that are brightest, and then we're going to come back in with our middle values. And then at the end, we're going to paint the darks and the details that bring the whole scene together. Through this process, you're not only going to learn how to paint this scene, but you can apply this same idea and concept to any other scene that you want to paint. Feel free to take a screenshot of this drawing if that would be helpful to you. Also, when I filmed this tutorial, I had a cold, so please excuse my voice. What we want to do first, we want to think about the lightest areas of our scene. Right now, we know the brightest part of this painting is the top of the barn, this little feeder that's over here, and the sky. So in our first wash, those are primarily the areas that we're concerned about. So what I'm going to do first is wet down the back of my paper. I'm using Saunders Waterford Cold Press 140-pound paper. If you don't like to paint with your paper sitting loose on the table, that's okay. You can tape your paper down and just wet down the front of it. I'll be using a variety of brushes, but mainly I need a large mop brush, a medium round brush, and then a smaller brush that has a little bit more of a point to it. I'm also using Daniel Smith watercolor paints. And as I work through the scene, I'll list out my paints along the way. I'll give you a full list down in the description. All right, I'm gonna start off with a large mop brush. What I like to do first when I'm painting the sky is I like to first add just a little bit of warmth. If there are some clouds in the scene, some light area of the sky, I like to lay that in first and then paint the darker blue part around that. So I'm using a little bit of lavender and raw sienna. And I'm going to put a touch of rose madder permanent in that. This light little bit of pigment is for the color of any cloud or the warmth of the sky as it reaches the bottom. Okay, and now I'm ready for some blue. So I'm going to take some cerulean, some ultramarine blue, and I'm going to negatively paint around some clouds. I'm not going to have a lot of clouds in the sky, but I can leave some brighter areas. It's kind of sweeping down in that direction. So see how you get that nice kind of sweeping cloud effect. And if that's a little too stark, you can take some blue or rinse a little bit out of that off your brush and just get some cerulean. And you can add a little bit lighter blue at the bottom. Okay, just adds a little bit of interest up in the sky. What I want to think about next is the top of that barn. I'm going to get a little bit of lavender, some raw sienna, and just put a little bit, just a touch of some value on the top of that. It's really light colored, so we don't need a lot, just a little bit. Okay, that'll be the top color of that barn. I'm going to use a little bit of raw sienna light. And just before I forget about this, there's this little, I guess it's a feeder where you would put grain or hay for livestock. Put that there. And now I'm going to rinse the blue off of my brush. And like I said, this isn't the final value for this part of the painting because I'm going to go over the ground again. It's just a starting point for that. So I'm just mixing some raw sienna, pretty light, thin wash, a little stronger, more raw sienna. Maybe a touch of Cobalt Turquoise. Just taking away the white of the paper, starting to think about values and remembering the lightest areas of our painting. So just a mixture of earth tones, greens, as we work our way down. Okay, and what I want to do is pause right here and throw in some light red on that barn. And this is also not the final value for the barn. This is just to get a little bit of that under painting on the barn. And if I will go in later and paint more boldly and strong on the barn. But if there's a little area that I leave and I want the red to shine through, a lighter color of red, I'll have this wash underneath it for that reason. And we'll come back, make that a lot stronger. A little more raw sienna, a little more cobalt turquoise. There's a little bit here, it's a little darker. I realize I painted right through that road, but that's okay. I can use some darks to kind of suggest it as we move on. So now I'm mixing the color up just a little bit. I threw in some lavender along with some burnt sienna. Just adding a little bit of variety. We don't want the painting to look completely the same all the way through. And I'm going to get a little stronger down here. A little more paint, a little more value. And I'm going to paint the direction of those directional lines even now. I want to remember that as a lead-in. Okay, I'm going to mix up a little bit more, a little more strength. That was a fairly simple wash, really just thinking about the lightest areas of the painting and setting us up for the next phase. Now I'm going to let my paper dry, and when I come back, I'm going to start with this distant hill and use that hill to frame in the barn. And when we do that, we'll really see the light start to stand out and come alive in this painting. Before we jump into the middle values of this scene, I have something I want to share with you. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help exactly with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting. All you need to do to download this free PDF is scroll down to the comment section and follow this link in my pinned comment to download 5 steps to planning a successful watercolor painting. Okay, I am back, and we are going to move into adding our middle values into the scene. And for us, that is this hill behind the barn that's going to outline the top of that, and then down into this area. We want to mix up a little bit of raw sienna. I use a lot of raw sienna. You'll see that popping up over and over and over again. And let's use some lavender. I like that combination, as you might be able to tell. And I'm going to put a little bit of Ultramarine Blue, Rose Madder, And I want kind of more of a dull yellow, dull kind of earth tone for the part of this hill that is in the distance. I don't like hard edges that completely cut off one part of the painting from another. And so one thing that I'm going to do, once I start to paint this hill in back here, I'm actually going to soften it with a damp brush. Just a little bit, not all of it back there, but just soften a little bit of it. So I have kind of a transition from the ground up into the sky, and not a hard edge that just cuts all the way across. So we'll come to that in a minute. I'll start from here. Get the shape of that hill in. And I do think I'd like to add maybe a touch more lavender. It's subtle, but it's important to have some difference in color temperature in the distance and then in the middle ground of the painting as well. Let's see. Make a little bit of this hill a little more prominent. Maybe it comes up like that right there. A damp, clean brush is what you want to use. I have a paper towel in my hand in case I need to take off some moisture. I'm going to go up to this edge. Just soften it. See how it makes a difference? And I'm rinsing, drying my brush off again. So it's just not cutting the painting in half. I just find that a little more interesting. Okay, we are going to be working from this bead. Two things that we want to remember: paint around this area and paint around the top of that barn as well. Now, as we move down the scene and I get more into our main area of interest, that's when I'll start to mix in a little more saturation, a little more color into this hill. And when you're transitioning from, if you load some more color on your brush, you can see how I'm kind of coming up here and then moving down. You can kind of create a more gentle transition by introducing some of that up into your wash. Okay, so now I'm gonna paint around the top of the barn. Okay, come to the other side. And you can use a smaller brush if you're more comfortable with that. Straighten that out a little bit. That looks pretty good. Okay, now I'll come to over here. Paint around that. Okay, now I want to mix in some more saturation, like I mentioned. More raw sienna, more cobalt turquoise. Okay, there's a little more green in some of this down here, and you'll be able to see that transition that I was talking about. See, I'm putting some of it just above. And there's no highlights that I need to worry about down here. If you want to leave, I do have a tree I'll be painting there. If you want to leave a few little bits, you can. But there's not much you really need to worry about painting around. Okay, we'll come to here. Okay, I'm going to mix in some more saturation. More color, more of the same. Raw sienna, cobalt turquoise, a little stronger. See, I can mix in, get some wet into wet transitions. Okay, I'm going to come back down to about where that road is. And we're just going to maybe hint at a road, but I'll do that in just a minute because there's something else important I need to get to, and that is the barn. So I'm going to mix up some red for that barn. You could use some Cadmium Red. I generally use Rose Madder Permanent and Burnt Sienna. Okay, and I have a smaller brush. I don't want it loaded with water where it's going to go everywhere. I need a little bit more control. But so I have the smaller brush. If you want to leave a little bit of that wash behind, you can. Kind of implies some of the texture of the wood. And you can go right through this part here to the other side. There's just something nice when you're negatively painting that creates a nice loose feel to the painting. Okay, that can go to the other side. Now we'll come and do the shadows later, but now we have that red of the barn in place. Maybe I'll add a little bit over here, kind of the shadow side of that. Some more yellow. The top of it's really catching the light. Let's move down to the ground here. And I'm going to use some of this. You know, there's some things that are crossing in front of it. I took most of it out. Oh well. There's a little hint of it there. That's kind of a broken edge. Grass. Texture. Okay, so there's that hill there. Now what we want to do is we want to connect some of that. Remember those directional lines I was talking about? That's what we want to do now. Get some lavender. Just kind of a warm gray is what I'm using. And then these come this way. Okay. And see how that's leading us right into the picture? There we go. I'm going to add some thicker pigment to just give us a little bit more variety of texture. Using a smaller brush again, holds less pigment. Because I don't want anything super wet that's just going to run down the paper. You see how we're led into this part of the scene, that these lines lead us up to the barn, and then the clouds lead us up to here. So we have a good visual pattern leading us through the painting. And you don't want to be super obvious about it, but you can look for things in nature in your scene that can lead you around. At this point, again, we are going to let things dry, and then we will come back in and we will add our darks into the scene. We are back and we are ready to paint the darks and the details of the scene and finish it up. So the first thing I'm going to do is focus on the barn, and I'm going to use some neutral tint, and I'm going to darken some of this red up. Okay, you can bring that down across the ground a little bit. All right, there's a underside of this. So some burnt sienna, neutral tint, and I'll put a little window on the barn. So now let's think about the trees. There's some lavender. I can also define part of this ditch or this hill with some of those darks. There's another tree here. And remember, I had those fence lines that kind of connected. There's one leading back kind of up this hill. And there were some more trees back here. And this is one that I'll probably break through the I'm just mixing up a darker gray color to continue this. One thing you can do is you can scratch in a few little highlights in these shapes as well while they're damp. Okay, what I want to do is add in some shadow. So I'm using some of the same. I'm just adding a little bit of ultramarine blue because the sunlight is going this way, so we can add in some shadows. If the edge is a little too stark or dark, you can lighten it with your finger a little bit. So I have this feeder here. I'm going to add some darks onto that. Just a few little fence posts and little things, casting shadows, giving this area a little more interest. Some little broken lines to suggest a fence line. I think the trick to painting watercolor, anyway, is trusting that the details are going to bring the painting together. knowing what to do in your first wash, your second wash, and understanding that the light will come about, the detail will come about later. Now I'm going to use a rigger brush, and it comes to a fine point, and I want a fine point for some of the trees, raw umber, neutral tint. Okay, and I'm going to add a little more to this tree here. Again, if I feel like I've done too much, I'll smudge some of it away with my finger and just leave the little bits that are important. Okay, we are nearing the end. There's two things that I still want to do. I'm going back to some of this color here, or just, a little bit of whatever you have on your palette, really. Just giving a little more texture. Just emphasizing a few of these lines, adding just a little more complexity to the texture there. And add a little bit of texture on this roof. Okay, there it is. There's the final painting. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful, and that as you start to understand the process and what to do in each individual wash, this will become a lot easier for you. Keep working at it, keep painting. I'll see you next time. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? You ever had that experience? You just are having a hard time finding consistency. Some of your paintings turn out, some of your paintings don't turn out, and you're not really sure why. Well, I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help exactly with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting to ensure that you're thinking through these important things as you get started. You can download this right now before you start your next painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.